Hello students and welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Shafari Nagpal, Associate Professor at Human Resource Development Center, Bhagat Phool Singh Mahila Vishwavidyalaya, Sonipat. Let us start with the paper Development of Management Thoughts, Principles and Types under the title Human Resource Management. Today we will study about the early contributors in the field of management. After completing this module, you will be able, firstly, to understand the great classical theories of management. Secondly, to enable a sense of humor about the beginning of the contributors towards the management practices. Thirdly, to build a relationship between early management thoughts and modern thought of control. Now let us see how the early contributors started with. The early contributors, they include Chester Barnard, who studied the organization in a systematic way and defined the organizations in two types. The Frank and Lillian Gilbreth, who were considered the founders of modern industrial management, who sought to improve workers' productivity while making their work easier. Gant contribution, who is often seen as disciple of Taylor and a promoter of scientific school of management. In his early career, with the influence of Taylor and Gant's aptitude for problem solving resulted in the attempts to address the technical problems of scientific management. In this module, we will learn in detail their contributions in management. Let us start the early contributor Chester Barnard. Chester Barnard was the president of the New Jersey Bell Telephone Company. He served in various other organizations too. His critical writings include The Functions of the Executive in the year 1938 and Organizations and Management written in the year 1948. The Elementary Conditions of Business Morals. His writing had important impact on the human organizations. In this organization theory, he adopted a sociological approach, and in dealing with the functions of executive, he stressed on the importance of the leadership and communication. Barnard divided the organizations in two parts. One is formal and informal organizations. He said that informal organization is an important part of the formal organization. Now let us study the general framework defined by him. Barnard considered corporations as cooperative structures, which he defined as a complicated of physical, biological, non-public and social components that are in a selected systematic relationship via motive of corporation of two or greater people for at least one particular give up. Basically, in line with the Barnard, we enter into cooperative arrangements to accomplish matters we cannot do of our own. He viewed corporations in biological terms corresponding to a residing organism that seeks to survive in an antagonistic surroundings. He also diagnosed that company isn't self enough. However, he desires to depend on assets from the outdoor surroundings that allow it to function and also limits a company moves. For example, an organization needs capital, hard work, equipment, sources to feature and achieve its desires. However, technological know-how and technology are assets inside the environment that can be tapped through an employer, but also restriction what it can accomplish. We cannot attain a purpose. This is outdoor the legal guidelines of the physics, for instance. Consistent with Barnard, an agency wishes to acquire system equilibrium. In this context of the principle, attaining equilibrium includes interrelated tactics. The primary system relates to the stability of the employee's trait and its outside environment. The second one technique attempts to stabilize the contributions that contributors of the business enterprise make to the company's collective cause and degree of pleasure. Both the corporation and individuals receive within the exchange. Now let us study Bernard's contribution to management thought. Bernard suggested social system approach to management. His main contribution to management thought can be described as the theory of formal organization. Let us study firstly the theory of formal organization. Bernard gave a theory of legal organization. He defined it as a system of continuously coordinated activities of forces of two or more persons. According to him, organization consisted of human beings whose activities were coordinated and therefore becomes a system. According to the Bernard, initial existence of structure depend upon three elements. Firstly, the willingness of a person to contribute efforts to the cooperative system. Secondly, there should be an objective of corporation. Third, there should be proper communication system which is necessary. Now let us understand with the help of example the organization structure defined by him. For example, at the top of an organization is the president, under whom there are various vice presidents, under which there are decision, managers and legal people. Under them there are further the accounting, marketing, human resource, entry level functions of an organization. Now let us secondly analyze the Bernard's organizational equilibrium. Bernard suggested an equilibrium model describes the balance achieved between the contributions of the members of an organization and return contributions made by the organization to the fulfillment of the individual goals of the members. Bernard treated the organization as a separate from the environment where it works. The people working in the organization have two roles, a personal role and an organizational role. And there should be a balance between what employees get out of the organization. For example, money, status, recognition, etc. and what they contribute in the form of time, knowledge, discomfort, production and similarly. Let us look at this diagram in which we can see there are three factors: environmental, social and economic. The environmental factors is a viable natural environment can be there, and in the social, nurturing community, economic, sufficiency and economy. These overlap and they create a sustainable development. When the environment and the social they overlap, there is a sustainable natural and the built environment. When the environment and the economics overlap, there is a sustainable economic development, and when the social and the economic overlaps, there is an equitable social environment. But when all the three they mix and they overlap each other, there is a sustainable development. With this diagram, I hope that you would be able to understand the organizational equilibrium. Now let us move to the third point, acceptance theory of authority. Bernard did not agree with the classical concept of authority where it comes from top to bottom. He said that powers comes from the bottom. In his opinion, power is confirmed only when it is accepted by a person to whom it has been addressed. Disobedience of such communication is a denial of authority. According to Bernard, the decision as to whether an order has the authority or does not lies with the people to whom it is addressed. It does not reside in persons of authority or those who issues these orders. Thus, in Bernard's view, if subordinate does not accept his manager's authority, it does not exist. A person will take the authority under the following conditions. Firstly, he can and does understand the communication. Secondly, at the time of his decision, he believes that it is not inconsistent with the purpose of organization. Thirdly, at the time of his decision, he believes it is to be compatible with the interest as a whole. And lastly, he is able to comply with it, mentally as well as physically. Both formal and informal organizations coexist in every enterprise. Friendly organizations refer to those social interactions which do not have a consciously coordinated common purpose. Frank and Lenian Gilbert, they also considered as the founder of the modern industrial management, who sought to improve the worker productivity while making their work easier. They were, above all, the scientists who asked to teach managers that all aspects of workplace should constantly be questioned and the improvements consistently adopted. In this way, their work advanced appreciation for the importance of addressing the needs of workers. And through taking care of those individuals, the whole purpose would be better served. The Frank and Lenian Gilbert were the married American couple. Both were engineers and had an interest in scientific management and time and motion studies. Working at a time with Frederick Taylor, the father of the scientific management, they together have raised 12 children in New Jersey. They are also known through the book and movie Cheaper by the Dozen, which was written by their son Frank Jr. and their daughter Ernestine. The book and the movie cover their family life and also some of the works as engineers. For example, there are scenes which depict the Gilbert conducting the test, such as testing to determine the most efficient way to bottom up a vest and using a stopwatch to help their investigation. Another example would be Frank Gilbert demonstrating while fully clothed the most efficient way to bath oneself using the least amount of time and least number of motions necessary. The Frank Gilbert was a building contractor who, though not have any formal education beyond his high school and not a disciple of Taylor, but was interested in and worked at achieving efficiency in the workplace. In this place of work, much like Taylor, he helped the company he used to work for to enable the workers to do their job efficiently. The Gilbert applied their management techniques in running their large household. They created a family council with a purchasing committee, a budgetary secretary, and a utility committee. Two of their children later wrote humorous accounts of the family life, Cheaper by the Dozen and Bellies on Their Toes. Under the lenient persuasion, the Frank Gilbert changed his career from construction to management. In the year 1908, Frank published his first book, Field System. After their marriage, Gilbert had to handle several major responsibilities: her studies, her family, and their family business. She worked as a system manager in her husband's consulting business and had helped her husband in his project. In the year 1910, the Gilbert moved to the Providence, Rhode Island, and Lenian Gilbert decided to enter Brown University to complete her doctoral studies in psychology. She earned her PhD in 1915, her dissertation entitled The Psychology of Management. It was the first degree granted in industrial psychology. Now the functions of the executive as defined by the Bernard. He says 3 types of duties for the executive in the formal organization setup. These are maintaining proper communication in the organization. Secondly, obtaining essential services from the individual for achieving corporate goals. Formulating purposes and objectives at all levels. Now let us see what Gilberts define in the work. The Gilberts were pioneers in the field of the industrial engineering. Frank Gilbert discovered his vocation when, as a young building contractor, he sought ways to make the bricklaying faster and easier. This grew into the collaboration with his eventual spouse, Lenian Moller, who studied the work habits of manufacturing and clerical employees in all sorts of industries to find ways to increase the output and make their jobs easier. He and Lenian founded a management consulting firm, Gilbert Incorporation, focusing on such endeavors. Their summer school of scientific management trained professionals to implement new ideas about management. They were concerned with the mental and the physical health of the workers. Through analyzing complex machinery, they invented new tools and methods to simplify their use. Their work led to a better understanding of importance of the well-being of the individual in the business setting. The Gilberts were able to reduce all motions of the hand in some combination of 17 essential actions. These included grasp, transport loaded and hold. Frank Gilbert named the motion Thurblinks. The Gilbert spelled backward with the transposed. He used a motion picture camera that was calibrated in fractions of minute to time the smallest of the actions of the workers. Also worked with physically challenged. During the World War I, Frank Gilbert worked to improve the treatment of the injured soldiers. He first observed the movements of the injured soldiers and then taught them new method to manage their daily activities. Frank Gilbert also helped to improve the surgical procedures in the hospital. He was the first to propose that surgical nurse serve as caddy. It was a term coined by him to a surgeon by handling surgical instruments to the surgeon as called for. He also devised the standard techniques used by the armies around the world to teach the recruits how to rapidly disassemble and reassemble their weapons even when blindfolded or in total darkness. These innovations have been arguably helped save millions of lives. They were the pioneers in agronomics. After the death of her husband, Lillian turned her attention towards household work and increasing the efficiency of the kitchen appliances. Working for the General Electric, she interviewed over 4,000 women to collect data on simple household chores, such as collection garbage or washing dishes. She then used the data to design the proper height for the sinks, stoves and other kitchen appliances. She patented numerous appliances that made work in the kitchen easier. In her two works, namely The Homemaker and Her Job in the year 1927 and in the another writing, Living with Our Children in the year 1928, she wrote that the home needs to be a happy place to live, where everyone would achieve fulfillment. Since wives and mothers needed to be the active managers of their home, she tried to find optimal combination of the items in typical home to make their lives easy. In relation to Taylorism, although the Gilbert's work is often associated with that of the Frederick Taylor, there was a substantial philosophical difference between Gilbert's and Taylor. The symbol of Taylorism was a stopwatch, and the Taylorism was primarily concerned with reducing the time of processes. The Gilberts, however, sought to make the operations more efficient by reducing the motions involved. They saw their approach as more concerned with the workers' welfare than Taylorism, in which workers were often perceived primarily about profit. This led to a personal rift between the Taylor and Gilbert, which after the death of the Taylor turned into a feud between the followers of the Gilbert and Taylor. After the Frank's death, Lillian took steps to heal the rift, although some friction remained over questions of history and intellectual property. Now let us see the legacy. The Gilberts were, above all, scientists who sought to teach managers that all aspects of the workplace should constantly be questioned and improvements invariably adopted. Their emphasis was on one best way, and the Thurblinks predates the development of the continuous quality improvement, which stands for CQI, as described by the George in the year 1968 to 98, and the late 20th century understanding that repeated motions can lead to the workers' experiences repetitive motion injuries. Although the Gilbert and the Taylor worked independently, their approaches towards improving the efficiency logically complemented each other. while Gilbert's focus on action and Taylor's on time, as time and motions are two sides of effectiveness improvement coin. Indeed, the two fields eventually became time and motion study. Henry Gantt was born into a family of prosperous farmers in Maryland in the year 1861. His early years, however, were marked by some deprivation as the Civil War brought about changes to the family fortunes. He graduated from the Johns Hopkins College in the year 1880 and was a teacher before becoming a draughtsman in 1884 and qualifying as a mechanical engineer. From the year 1887 to 1893, he worked at Midvale Steel Company in Philadelphia, where he became the assistant to the chief engineer, who was Frederick W. Taylor, and then superintendent of the casting department. Gantt and Taylor, they worked well in their early years together, and Gantt followed the Taylor Simmons Rolling Company and also to Benthlehem Steel, and from 1900, Gantt became well known in his right as a successful consultant as he developed interest in broader, even conflicting, and aspects of the management. In the year 1917, he accepted a government commission to contribute to the war effort in Frankfurt Arsenal and for the Emergency Fleet Corporation. Now let us study the Gantt contribution. Gantt is often seen as a disciple of Taylor and a promoter of the scientific school of management. In his early career, with the influence of the Taylor, the Gantt aptitude for problem solving resulting in the attempts to address the technical problems of scientific management. Like Taylor, Gantt also believed that it was the only application of scientific analysis to every aspect of work which could produce industrial efficiency, and that improvements in the management came from the eliminating chance and accidents. Gantt made the four individual and notable contributions. First is the task and bonus system. Gantt work and bonus wage system was introduced in the year 1901 as a variation on Taylor's differential piece rate system. With Gantt's system, the employee received a bonus in addition to his regular day rate if he accomplished the task for the day. He would still receive the day rate even if the work was not completed, whereas the Taylor piece rate system penalized the employee for substandard performance. As a result of introducing the Gantt system, which enabled workers to earn a living while learning to increase their efficiency, production often more than doubled. This convinced Gantt that concern for the worker and employee morale was one of the most important factors in the management and led him eventually to part company from Taylor on the fundamentals of scientific management. The second notable contribution was perspective of the worker. Gantt realized that his system offered little incentive to do more than just meet the standard. He subsequently modified it to pay according to time allowed plus a percentage of the time if the tasks were completed in that time or less. Hence, a worker could receive 3 hours pay for doing a 2 hours job in 2 hours or less. But here, Gantt brought in innovation by paying the foreman a bonus if all the workers met the required standard. This constituted one of the earliest recorded attempts to reward the superintendent for teaching employees to improve the way they worked. In Work, Wages and Profit, Gantt wrote, "Whatever we do must be in accord with human nature. We cannot deprive people, we must direct their development. The general policy of the past has been to drive, but the era of the force must give way to that of the knowledge, and the system of the future will be to teach and lead, to the advantage of all concerned." The Gantt was interested in an aspect of the industrial education which he called habits of industry. Habit of industriousness and cooperation, doing work to the best of the one's ability, and pride in the quality as well as the quantity of work. From his experience as a teacher, Gantt hoped that his bonus system would help to convert the foreman from an overseer and driver of the workers to a helper and teacher of subordinates. The third major contribution of the Gantt was the chart. Gantt bar chart started as a simple but effective mechanism for recording the progress of the employee towards a task standard. A daily record was kept for each worker in black if he met the standard, in red if he didn't. This expanded into 4 charts on quantity of work per machine, amount of work per worker, cost control and other subjects. It was while grappling with the problem of tracking all the various tasks and activities of the government department on the war effort in the year 1917 that Gantt realized he should be scheduled by the time and not on quantities. His solution was a bar chart which showed how work was scheduled over time through its completion. This enabled management to see in graphic form how well work was progressing and indicated when and where the action would be necessary to keep on time. Gantt chart have been applied to all kinds of the projects to illustrate how scheduling may be best achieved. To illustrate a Gantt chart, we take the mini project of redecorating an office with the steps of first, establishing the terms of reference and standards of quality, cost and time. Secondly, informing all appropriate personnel and customers. Thirdly, arranging alternative accommodation. Fourthly, preparing the office, and last, redecorating. The Gantt chart provided a graphic means of planning and controlling work and led to the development of PERT diagrams, which are called as and famous with program evaluation and review technique. The fourth contribution of the Gantt was the social responsibility of business. After the death of Taylor in 1915, he seemed to distance himself further from the core principles of scientific management and extended his management interest to the functions of leadership and the role of the firm itself. As his thinking developed, he believed increasingly that management had objections to the community at large and that the successful organizations had a duty towards the welfare of society. In organizing for the work, he argued that there was a conflict between profit and service, and that the businessman who says that the benefits are more important than the service he renders, he states, has forgotten that his business system had a foundation in service, and as far as the community is concerned, has no reasons for existence except the service it can render. These concerns of him led him to assert that the business system must accept its social responsibility and devote itself primarily to the service, or the community will ultimately make an attempt to take it over to operate it in its interest. The Gantt was hugely influenced by the events in Russia in the year 1917, and in fear that the large companies was sacrificing service to profit, he began to attack the profit system itself, calling for public service corporation to ensure service to community. In perspective, his contribution to the advancement of the management science are of the great significance. Gantt was a prolific writer and speaker. He addressed the American Society of Mechanical Engineers on some occasions. One of his papers, Training Workmen in Habits of Industry and Corporation in the year 1908, has been noted by several commentators as giving a unique insight into the human relation dimensions of management at a time when scientific management was at its peak. His approach to the foreman as a teacher marks him as an early contributor to the human behavioral thought in a line which stretches back to Owen and forwards with Mayo to the present day. His approach to the duty of firm towards society also singles him out as one of the earliest spokesmen on the social responsibility of business. But it is the inventor of the Gantt chart that he will be remembered. It has been suggested that his thinking became somewhat vague shortly before his death, and he began to situate the work of the firm in a broader national and political context. It seems that there was a struggle in his later years between service and appropriate rewards on the one hand and socialist control policies on the other. Now let us summarize what we have studied in this module. Chester Bernard adopted sociological approach. In dealing with the functions of executive, he stressed on the importance of leadership and communication. Bernard divided the organization into formal and informal. He said that informal organization is an important part of formal organization. The Gilberts were the scientists who had sought to teach managers that all aspects of the workplace should be constantly questioned and improvement should be constantly adopted. Their emphasis was on the one best way and development of the continuous quality improvement, that stand for CQI. Although the Gilberts and Frederick Winslow Taylor worked independently, their approaches to improving efficiency logically complemented each other, with the Gilberts' focus on motion and Taylor's on time, as time and motion of efficiency improvement, which eventually led to time and motion study. Gantt approach to this duty of the firm towards the society also singles him out as one of the earliest spokesperson on the social responsibility of business. Of all his major contribution, he will always be remembered is PERT. Thank you.